there. So we'll close citizens forum and then move on to our only item under old business, which is the discussion of adoption of RSA 72:61-72 as a overview. This is a recommendation in the master plan. We had briefly discussed this at our meeting on August 22nd. I sent you through the city manager update with regard to this topic after I had spoken with Mr. Lassard, our assessor. So it is my hope that we can come to an agreement whether we want to move forward with this, and if so, to direct the city manager to have an ordinance drafted and then have a first reading on the 24th if we think we can be ready for that. So this is about, for those in the audience, this is about tax exemptions for renewable energy. So, Mr. Lassard, would you like to give us further information on that?
I'm happy to. I thought that the email that you sent with regard to our discussion was right on point. Only comment that I would make about that was, item 1, you talked about Mr. Lassard has yet to see an increase in market value due to the installation of renewable energy systems in the Northeast. And I'm not familiar with the whole Northeast personally, and with our company, Maine and New Hampshire, I have not seen any. Okay. And I have not seen any reports for the Northeast. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have with regard to either solar or wood heating or any other exemption that you might want to discuss.
Okay. So these exemptions, I'm sorry, Assistant Mayor Dameron?
No, I thought one comment, and I think it was attributed to you in the information we got, just simply reminding homeowners that once you install the solar roof panels, their life at 40 some odd years far exceeds the life probably of your shingles. So to be prepared for the fact you're going to have to go through getting them off the roof and redoing it, and it's not enough to just simply put them up and keep them there.
Right. If they're going to be rented or whatever, then you just need to address that issue at the beginning and not have it be an oh my goodness moment 20 years down the road.
Yeah.
So could you talk to the council and the public about the overall purpose for these tax exemptions and how it's structured so that it's a tax neutral policy, meaning it doesn't hurt the city or the property owner with regard to taxes?
Yes. My understanding of the creation of the exemptions was simply to promote renewable energy sources. And so with regard to how it affects things, since there is no yet data that we can analyze to find out that there is an advantage in terms of market value, what generally happens is that if someone installs it at whatever cost it might be, $10,000, $20,000, or whatever, that cost not be added to the assessment. And so if the exemption is such that it's equal to any increase in value, then down the road, if in fact there is an increase in value, that increase would be exempted. Currently, as it stands, which means it wouldn't be on the taxable roll, but currently as it stands, the exemptions essentially are neutral because you could add the fact that there is a system there so that you can record as time goes on, whether or not there is any change in market value, but that the assessment doesn't increase because you've added it, and also there's no reduction in the current assessments because it's only foregoing, if you will, any increase in value.
So, is that clear to everybody? Okay. And that, I think Councilor Kowalski, when we first started talking about this, said, you know, can we look at and see if there were any unintended negative consequences to adopting these exemption? And I think you were very astute in bringing up to me in our discussion that that could happen if the exemption was not the value, but the cost of the installation, as some communities have done. And if you could give the example that you gave me, I thought it was very clear.
Okay. Yeah. If in fact the ordinance, you know, says that if you add whatever kind of solar, wood, or whatever, and its cost is deducted from the value, then there would obviously, from the assessed value, then there obviously would be a loss in total assessed value of the community. So as long as it relates to foregoing any increased value, then it is neutral to the current assessment.
So if you had an opportunity to look at the DRA website and the map that they had, not the map, but there was an Excel spreadsheet about the 135 municipalities that have adopted tax exemptions for solar. How they did the exemption varied from one community to another, and those that did the exemption to be related to the cost of the installation. Some of it was the cost of the system itself. Some communities said the cost of the system plus the installation, and various pieces of that. What Mr. Lassard's saying is if we go in that direction, then you are risking having a lower assessed value, which then would be detrimental to the city. It would be good for the individual property owner, but it'd be bad for the city as a whole. So the idea is to adopt the exemption so it's tax neutral. So there's no harm to anybody, but you're giving property the owners of having the potential of increasing their market value as we move forward with renewable energies. I think that probably will happen, but it also gives property owners the ability to create their own energy and reduce their electricity costs. So if the council has no further questions of Councilor Kowalski?
I'm just trying to understand the big picture. So how do we arrive at the value of the system itself? Is it based on the building permit being pulled, and does that include labor and installation?
Well, right now, we're not showing a market value. So how we arrive at it being zero is that there isn't evidence of properties selling with it. There is no evidence that those properties sell at a higher value than a very similar value without it. In terms of how some of the communities, as the mayor said, you know, exempt the cost, excuse me, or exempt a flat amount. I can say, you know, you'll get a $10,000 exemption. If that's the case, that does in fact reduce the assessment. If in fact you say you're only going to exempt any increase in value, currently there isn't any increase in value that we have found in the sales data that we have.
So, Mr. McNutt?
So, I mean, hypothetically, have some other communities that have adopted the approach you're talking about, where they just talk about limiting future increases in value, have some communities perhaps set a symbolic increase in value, say $5,000, $3,500?
Not to my knowledge. It would simply be a matter of analyzing the market to see if there is a difference. And down the road, if it's 500 or 5,000, that would be the amount that the exemption ought to be, if, based on the process that we're talking about.
So I think what Mr. McNutt is alluding to, and I can't be certain that I saw it, but there were caps on some of the exemptions, like it could say exempt the value up to whatever the amount was. So that's a possibility as well.
If I remember correctly, and I may not, in looking at data some time ago, there were a number of communities that said a flat amount, like
Yeah.
10,000 or whatever.
So, do you think it's time to, if there's consensus from the council, if this is the direction you want to move forward, again, it does support the master plan, we can start the process having the ordinance drafted, and then, go from there. If you'd like to do that?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to move this further along, to ask for a draft ordinance to be worked up and brought back to the council. I think the question of cost versus value is going to have to be carefully worded in that ordinance, but that's why we need to look at a draft. So I think we ought to go that way and limit it to, in my opinion, to solar only.
And that was my next question. So these exemptions deal with solar, wood, with caveats, and wind. So we can have a draft that incorporates all of them, or only solar, or whatever you want to do. Councilor Kier.
So I just have a question, kind of in reference to this. I know that zoning board had talked previously about not having really any ordinances on the books about how much, how big, where, et cetera, people can put these on their properties. Is that something we should also look at in conjunction with this? I would just hate for us, I think this is a great idea and I do think we should move forward. I'm not saying that at all, but I would hate for us to put this great incentive package together for people and then us not have any guidelines for them to go by, and then maybe we get in a sticky situation that we don't want to be in.
So I think where we're at now is we have to have a draft of something, and that has to be shared probably with the zoning board, probably with the energy committee. It needs to go to a couple places before we go to first hearing. Or maybe it should go to first hearing so we get input from the public before, first hearing's not for public. But it's got to go to a few, but we've got to have something to start with. So I think if we can agree on what the guidance should be in the first draft of that ordinance, that would be helpful. I think one of the things that the council would probably be concerned with is we want a tax neutral outcome, right? We don't want to hurt anybody in the process.
And I would want it to be for solar and wind, personally.
Councilor Kowalski?
I had the same solar and wind.
Okay.
I'd like to see solar and wind.
Okay. Councilor Zullo?
I guess I don't understand why we're against the wood, too. I mean, if somebody's willing to upgrade from a wood stove to something that's more energy efficient as far as burning wood, why wouldn't we give them the incentive, too?
Okay. Comments to all of these? Anything? Okay. Councilor Kowalski?
I guess that'll be another larger discussion, I think, but adding wood into this, just like we did with these two other ordinances that people came out, and not the ordinance, but those wood has pollutant. The other two don't. So that's only my concern. Even though some wood system may be cleaner than, but I guess if it's worded that way, if they're changing from something to,
Something that's less pollutant?
yes,
Okay.
but not just one for one.
Okay. Mr. McNutt?
Well, kind of going off of what Councilor Zullo was saying, I think some folks have been able to take advantage of this technology. It's really, really new, but I think the sort of speed of its rollout is going to happen more rapidly than we suspect, is the batteries as well. So maybe, well, we'll see what we can find for first drafts of other communities that have already adopted tax neutral approaches, and if there's ways that we can leave this flexible enough for future expansion to if certain wood technologies change, and then if the batteries become more widely available.
Okay. Councilor Kowalski?
Oh, Councilor Pope.
He was first. Councilor Pope?
Well, I'm looking at the RSAs, and if we adopt RSAs 72, 61 through 72, we are adopting wood as well. The wood heating energy systems are, in fact, the descriptions are pretty choked down.
Yep.
And so I do agree with that pellet stove systems and such, they are now installed, a lot of them with the catalytic converter type systems and such. So
Again,
like that looked at.
the purpose of all of this really is to, incentivize people to some degree to go to more renewable energy. And we're not going to get from where we are today to where, to 100% renewable energy overnight. So it'll take an incremental approach. So perhaps, since the master plan does say, recommend, adopting 72:61 through 72, the draft ordinances that you look at, Mr. McNutt, they should probably include all three at this point in time, and we can discuss it further when we have the draft. But I think we're universal and steady, and we want it to be tax neutral. We don't want to risk. Yes. Okay. Anything else that you would like to see in the draft ordinance? Councilor Kowalski?
I don't want to get too far off topic, but I would like to know, I do know already that safety hasn't kept up with solar installations. I just recently took a 4-hour class on responding to incidents with solar panels. I'd like to know from the planning office if we're going to start marketing and advertise an incentive on this, and we're the community. I don't want to be the test community for something bad happening. And I guess the answer, what I'm looking for is what the code is here as far as solar installations, roof, and standalone facilities.
Oh, for building codes you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because the answer basically is they're live all the time. And if a car drives through something with no barrier around it, one of the questions is, how do you respond to that and get the person out? And the answer is, nobody's had to worry about it yet.
I'm surprised because 135 municipalities have adopted this, solar.
But nationally, the safety has not kept up with.
Wow, okay. All right, anything else? Councilor Pope, you're thinking.
The solar we're talking about is not just solar electric, but also solar water systems, things like that.
I believe we're talking about solar photovoltaic. Is that how they say it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Let me look that up because I thought.
it would be in the RSA. They describe it.
I do believe it encompasses not to also water heating systems. I remember seeing that.
Do you have the answer, Councilor O'Hara?
Says building or heat water
Yep.
produced in the building.
That does.
Okay, good, all right. Anything else? Any other direction you want to give the city manager? Nope, okay.